Good morning and welcome to my little feature overview. This is like the last one for now. I'm trying to rein everything in for the start of the season. We're about a week away, week and a day, and I just want to give you one last glance at all the bells and whistles of pupstatus.com. I've been doing this for like 2 years now. The concept has been alive for like three, four maybe. I don't know. I'd have to look back to see, but I'm finally kind of getting the nuts and bolts together, and I feel like it's becoming kind of what I want it to become. Um, I have this fancy microphone right here, which actually isn't doing shit because it just makes the recordings not work. So I'm just going to leave it here because I paid money for it and it might as well be in the shot. Put on a hat because this is like the new fantasy football guy look: the hat, the beard, unkept hair, and then some coffee. Nightmare Before Christmas, Jack Skellington. My wife loves this character. I do too. I was going to call it shit, but I got to talk better than that. Anyway, so we are looking at the home screen of pupstatus.com. The first glance, you see my cheat sheet that I put together. It's currently in pre-draft mode. I'm going to move this fucker out of the way. Basically, I'm ranking players per team by their average draft position at their position. Not every team is listed because not every team actually has an injury or someone who's out, which is what dictates the value of this table. Basically, I'm looking for players that might be down, and then you want to look at their respective backup to see if you could maybe snatch someone up that's going way later in the draft that is actually of some pretty good, significant value. If you look at Arizona here, Kyler Murray's out. He's at 157, his average draft position. His backup is 221, so that'd be kind of a value. I think they dropped Colt McCoy. I don't know why he's still on there, but he would be sort of a value. I mean, he's 70 positions later. I wouldn't draft any quarterbacks on this team this year, but that's just kind of the concept. Like if Joe Burrow were to be out, his backup would be a steal. I guess quarterbacks are kind of a bad place to start for this. That would be more towards when we get into waiver wire season. But if we come down here, like the big, for instance, is Jonathan Taylor, who, as of now, is going to be on the pup status or the pup list. So he's out for at least 4 weeks, and his backup is at 230. So you have someone who's going to, well, they say now Zach Moss is presumably going to start. We'll see. He's kind of a journeyman. I think he's been with Indianapolis for a while. I forget who he's been with exactly, but he's drafting at 271. He's going to be their starting running back. So that's going to be a value at least for a couple games this season. I'd rather go with someone like Evan Hull, someone young who I haven't really seen do his thing yet, but we will see. We'll see what happens there. But anyway, the whole point is that if the top guy is out, you have these guys behind him that are going to start, and you might just get like an awesome value on that. So you can go through here. Wide receivers, same thing. Breece Hall. Well, I guess we're still in the running back world here. But if you see a lot of injuries, a lot of questionable players, that's going to give some value to the people below them. So just something to look at. It's a cheat sheet, just worth a glance. Cooper Kupp's going to be back. That's not an issue. Once the season starts, I'm going to change this over to this STR rating, which is kind of like an average of 0 to 100 ratings I've found for players across the web. It will give you an indication of their talent. It doesn't always indicate their productivity or their value to the actual team, but it does give you an indication of their potential. I feel like so people don't always get the most targets because that goes to the first and second tier guys. But if they're have a lot of talent underutilized, and all of a sudden the guy in front of them goes down, which you'll see in this chart. That could be a potential waiver wire pickup once the season starts. So that's what the cheat sheet concept is to see who's down and then who's immediately behind them in kind of a high level view. And you can just go through here and quickly glean people when it's your waiver wire week to see who might be valuable or worth picking up. So that's that. Now to get into the actual meat and potatoes of pupstatus.com, it is this. I don't know if I paused, the video disappeared for a second there. This is the deal. This is what I have been working on for a few years. Essentially, you're looking at the lineups. You're looking at the Chiefs versus the Lions, offense and defense. Kind of like their general base package is set to formation. They run a 4-3. It's a lot different these days, like a lot of nickel packages, a lot of it's not even the majority of the time they stick with one particular package. I have a whole data sheet of different packages that they do play that I haven't jammed in here just yet. Again, I'm just trying to get enough done for the season. There's an endless amount of stats you can add, especially in the NFL, with so much stuff. Eventually, I would love to have this thing like a full Minority Report style interface to go through players and look at their details, look at routes, look at packages, personnel, etc. But this is a good start and does give you a lot of information just at one glance here. To start really quickly over here in this player watch table is just the players who are injured that are visible on the screen now. And then you can click on their little comment here to see exactly what is going on with them, see if they're going to be out for a while or if it's something, they're going to come back this week for. Close that guy out. So what you're looking at here with these circles and whatever, the transparent ring is the strength of that position. So a bigger ring just represents more strength, a better player at that position. It's just that I don't put a cumulative value, but I put the value of the top player at that position. So you can see this huge ring at tight end, Kansas City. I'm sure you know who that's referring to. And then the pie is subdivided into which players they have at that position. So Kansas City has 1, 2, 3, 4 tight ends. And then each slice of the pie is also represented by the value or the strength of that player at that position. So the big slice of the pie here is Travis Kelce. The reason for that is for situations like this where decent size, ring here at free safety, but a big slice of that is red, meaning that player is out. Yellow means questionable. And then there's also an orange, brownie orange, which is doubtful. So this is just kind of a quick glance at where there are injuries on the field. Mostly going to be useful for looking at defenses to see where they are weak. If we swap sides here, we can see Kansas City has a lot of going on this side of the ball. So, the idea is that you look at it, you have players on Detroit's offense who go, well, shit, anybody who likes to run to the right side or lines up on the right side, Goff is, I believe, right-handed, tends to drift out here and throw to the right. There are other views I'll show you to show their tendencies. I'll show you that in a moment. But this is an area of the defense that might be weak for this week. And they're still, I think, holding out. Chris Jones is still holding out. So that's a big, miss on their line too. They're still very high ranked defense. So take it with a grain of salt what injuries might happen. And as I get into individual game analysis here, I'll describe if certain players are more impact players or team players. Depending if they do man coverage, then your cornerbacks are awesome studs, right? Or if everybody's just kind of medium-sized ring, that means they generally, spread duties around more of a zone, or maybe they do play man, but the way they cover or position themselves is better oriented for whoever they're going up against. And there are some stats on here that will kind of express that, and I'll show you those in a moment. But anyway, so the general concept, size of ring shows strength at position. Each slice of the pie is which player and how much value to that position they are individually, and their status as well. So again, clicking on each position will give you a table of those players at that position. Each position has its own set of values. I think the line is very simple. It's just how many snaps, height, and weight. There's not too much, and then of course their strength value, which is important. Once you get into like the actual scoring positions, like tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers, you're going to get rushing attempts, rushing yards, targets, receiving yards, their status, comment if they are out, and then if they've played this team before in the last year. I don't have multi-years of history because that costs a lot more money, and I don't make any money off of this. This is just kind of a passion project right now. You can click on that and see, excuse me, how they performed against, excuse me, how they performed against that team in the previous year. So like more, rivals like Jets and Buffalo will have that icon there. So anyway, with scoring positions, you get their receiving and rushing stats. Other than quarterback, you'll get also their pass attempts, pass yards, touchdowns, interceptions, etc. They also have rushing yards and rush attempts. I don't put receptions for quarterbacks because it's like twice a year you see a quarterback go fake it and go out for a pass or whatever. So you can click on players to see their stats. On defense, you can see how many tackles and sacks they had at linebacker and on the line. I could add in passes defended for linebackers. They do cover tight ends and, end up out there every once in a while, but I just try to stick to the basic concepts. Strong safety and cornerback positions, you're going to get tackles, sacks, but also interceptions, passes defended. They also have their strength rating, height, weight, etc. The concept is, and this is really fun to do too, is while you're watching a game and an announcer, mentions a player, someone you haven't really heard of yet, especially like the wide receiver position. It's fun to kind of open them up, see where they are in the depth chart, see what they did before, where they're at now, etc. That's the general idea of this overview. Up here you have which field it's at, what the date is. If I can, I'll sneak in the weather and maybe the odds, and the predicted score based on the odds. That's good information. I find it often gets you, depending on the type of game you're playing, like redraft leagues, doesn't really matter. You just got to find where your players are and which ones are going to do the best. So, scoring will matter when you're at your wide receiver 2, 3 flex positions. But it makes a huge difference when you're doing like DFS and stuff like that. And I will say this system is like particularly tuned for single game DFS. It's so fun to like literally concentrate on one whole deal and just go for it with all the information in front of you here. Okay, let's get into, and then this is just where you select games. I have it spelled out alphabetically. I used to just have one of each, but it's very confusing. So at least here you can just see exactly which team you want to get to by their name. Every team's name will be up here twice because they're playing each other. But you'll know where the game is when it says versus or at. Okay, so the button swap sides, switches the side of the ball you're on. This little aperture icon opens up just a very basic matchup of the secondary versus receivers. And this is a good table to look at just to see like talent and height and weight. Like if you have a giant group of receivers that average 6'3", 200 pounds versus cornerbacks that are 5'9" and 190, maybe a good situation to look at. I just like to look for overloads, like how many players at this position are super talented versus how many are here. If they have a max, like awesome cornerback and then nothing left, you can probably assign that to their top player over here, depending on the type of coverage they play, which again, I'll get into when I do specific games, but that gives you kind of an indication of who's next in line and who to look at. And then of course with safeties, I could list linebackers because they cover tight ends, but just haven't got to that part yet. So yeah, this is, I call it the spread matchup. Just gives you kind of an overview of like cornerbacks versus receivers and some basic stats like height, weight, and their kind of strength value. This strength value, take it or leave it. Like I put it there. It's, there's different systems and different types of rankings out there. I tried to find the ones that I felt best correlate with players and then just averaged them all together. I don't want to say names because even though this is free, I don't want to get like a cease and desist letter and like ruin my week because I'm just putting a lot of effort into this, just to hopefully get some traffic. So that's the aperture icon. Next is the pin. This shows you passing tendencies. So the Lions like to throw it to the right 40% of the time, to the left 39%, up the middle 20%. They average 7-yard deep per target. That's not a stat that, oops, go back here. That's not a stat that changes that much. You'll see it go from 6 to 9, but there's probably a better way to represent that. I'll work on that. Like Miami probably dumps it off 3, 4, or 5 yards most of the time. Then all of a sudden they go, 30 yards downfield, and then Waddle or Hill run it in. Other stats here: wide receivers, they throw to 62% of the time, tight ends 16% of the time, running backs 21% of the time. So some basic like overall stats. I like matching this up with the defense because, again, they like to throw it to the right, and that's where Kansas City looks like they're a little bit banged up, or at least questionable. So that is an opportunity. When you go through games and you see a situation like this, you might think, well, shit, they might have a decent chance passing to the right of the ball. Detroit in the power rankings is like 12th, something, 13th. I guess depending on when you've looked at them, but they're not a terrible team. I don't think they're going to do too well against the Chiefs, but maybe that's something to look at. Again, not getting into individual game analysis yet, but just something to keep in mind. Rushing gap. This is where they like to run the ball. So the Detroit Lions like to run off the tackle a lot, not in the middle a lot, to the edge, a decent amount, but they really like going off tackle or in between the tackles. I guess tackle and guard. This would be the center guard gap. Also, another thing to pay attention to, especially if like this guy's injured, they're going to run it up here. Their right defensive end looks like he's a little bit banged up. So again, that could be some opportunity for Montgomery. These are Montgomery's stats from last year. I'm going to leave all the historical stats from last year for the first few games, just so that we don't have zeros up there. But I'll probably add in like rookie stats, so at least we get some indication of how much they're being used. Maybe I'll put in a little switch there. You can see historical versus this year. But this is just good to know, the general usage of a player. Obviously, Montgomery is from Chicago, so it will change significantly with Detroit, hopefully a lot more. I actually really look forward to seeing Montgomery play in Detroit. I think that's going to be a good match for him. Okay, so I can show you the rushing gap. This eyeball is just the player watch. And then this little icon up here is just showing the special teams, how their health is. If a punter's down, could mean better field position, place kicker, maybe the field goals, they're just going to go for 2 points more often. Kind of very like small details, but something, if you can make use of that to make better decisions, more power to you. That's what it's there for. This little thing is this other concept I have going on called the grid view. You're welcome to check that out. I'm not going to go over that in this video. So those are the menu buttons up here. These are just sharing icons over here if you want to follow me. I don't really do anything on Instagram, a little bit of Twitter. Seems like nobody really cares what I have to say. YouTube, I'll be posting these. If you want to sign up to my mailing list, I'm happy to update you. I send out images of the cheat sheet, etc. More than welcome to join. I'd love to have you. And then we can be friends. Okay, so next is if you actually click on the team names, you're going to get rankings and tendencies. Again, this is fairly simple to start. I will be filling this out much more as we go. But again, I just need a starting place for the season that's stable, and I don't want to overload too much information. So clicking there gives you their rankings. And I do rankings based on the value of that metric, not the position. So a pass rank doesn't mean quarterbacks. Generally, it'll obviously pertain to quarterbacks, but I am just anybody who passes gets these points. And then same with receptions. This doesn't designate tight end, wide receiver, running back. It's just anybody who actually made that reception and how many points they scored. And then rushing as well. I just don't want to conflate wide receivers and running backs because, we have a passing running back. You can get into that information just by clicking on that player and checking out how many, reception yards and targets they get. Montgomery had a decent amount of targets last year and a decent amount of yards and receptions, but you can get that there. The whole point of this is just to show what they do in general. So this is their rankings. Detroit was pretty good. They were 6th in passing, 8th in receptions, and 7th in rushing. I like separating pass and receptions too because the receiver does a lot of work after catching, and that, I think that better represents that statistic. Excuse me. Yeah. So then you have your run pass distribution over here. Obviously, Detroit likes to pass the ball a little bit more than they rush. We'll see if that holds true again this year. And again, these are all last year's stats. So with new coaching, new coordinators, etc., a lot of these will be kind of moot. But it's a good starting place for, how performant a team can be anyway. Okay, on the defensive side of the ball, a little bit more interesting. Starting out with rankings, Chiefs just weren't good. Pretty much dead last against passers. Almost last in receptions, but very good against the run. So it's a good stat to know if you're starting a running back versus your receivers against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, these are cool. This is their distribution to what tiered receiver. I only went 1 through 4. You can go, I know some sites 5, 6, 7, 8 tiers, but basically this shows you how many points were given to which tier. And this is so that you can determine who might be a better player or a better play for your wide receiver 2 or 3 or flex spot. We always start our wide receiver ones. That's just going to happen. But at least against the defense, you can see if they give up. Do they focus on the wide receiver 1 or do they just kind of let everybody play? And this scatter plot kind of shows you that there is a bit of a regression line according to their a tier or rank of a receiver. So the lesser the rank, the less likely they are to have a huge game. The higher the rank, the bigger the likelihood. So that tells me that Kansas City just lines up and doesn't necessarily assign people to a particular player. They just play it as it is, and the stats will fall as they do. If we swap the side, let's see if the Lions are a little bit, they're kind of same on this regression line. But what you want to look for, some are pretty flat across the board, meaning that you could start any position or any tiered receiver and have pretty good expectations. And then some are just really hard line. I wouldn't start my lower level wide receivers against those particular teams. Like, let's go to a team with a great defense. Bills actually have a great defense as well as the Jets. So we'll just look at them. And you see they follow their regression line pretty tightly. But if we swap the sides of the ball, the Jets are pretty flat. But mind you, that's also because the top scoring receiver against them all year last year was like 41, 42 points. But that was almost matched by a 110th ranked receiver. So if you're going to be playing the Jets, I wouldn't recommend playing your receivers against them. But if you had to, your wide receiver 2 might actually do pretty well as your wide receiver 1 against this defense. So that's kind of a cool little metric. Let's find a worse defense. This will be a good one. The Raiders. They didn't, I don't know where their wide receiver 1s they matched up against. I think they only had like in their division or played against 1 or 2. So they didn't come up in this graph again. This is last year's data, but it doesn't really matter who they're playing or which position. They're going to give up points to anybody. Like they'll give up 20 points to the 150th ranked receiver. and so on and so forth. So just kind of a cool little chart to look at to see if there's opportunity for your lesser guys to score against this team, and maybe make some assumption as to whether or not this team focuses on the most talented player, or just kind of lets it fly and does their job against whoever is in whatever position. I think that's pretty much it. Enough to get started. And it is kind of what you make it. I've had some success using this. Again, it's great for DFS, single game especially, but also very useful for, your just determining best matchups for whatever players you have. At some point, I'll add in where you can import your team, all that kind of stuff. Again, though, I'm doing this for free. Maybe when I have like ads on the site, get enough traffic for that, or maybe a premium, section. If people really find this super useful, I'll pursue it. I'd love that because I have put a lot of work into it. Looks like it would be a good game for Josh Jacobs because their nose tackle's down, and the Raiders like to run it up the middle. So there's your chance to hit Denver where it hurts. Although Denver has a really good defense, they look a little bit banged up. So maybe some opportunity for the Raiders, who it's not promising this year for, and that's a little sad for them. But you lose Derek Carr. I don't know. I don't want to get too into like my feelings about players, but I'm not exactly excited about Jimmy Garoppolo, but we'll see. I am excited for Russell Wilson. I want to see what he does under like a coordinator that actually lets him be Russell Wilson a little bit. I think that'll be fun. Obviously, I think Jerry Jeudy's out for a little while, so we'll see what happens with him. But I think Sutton should have a bounce back year. And then they got some new guys that are kind of fun to watch. So that's going to be a fun team, I think, in the first few weeks to see what they can do. I do hope they come alive. And with that defense, they could be very formidable. Anyway, thank you again for checking out my site here. And I hope this is something you can use and have fun with. Take care. I'll post some videos, single game analysis, and I hope you'll find it useful.